Hello and welcome to e-GMAT. We will solve question number 11 of OG Verbal Second Edition by using e-GMAT three-step process. In the first step, we will understand the meaning of the sentence. In the second, we will evaluate the errors in the sentence. And finally, we will review all the answer choices to get to the correct answer. So let's begin. Native to South America, when peanuts were introduced to Africa by Portuguese explorers early in the 16th century, they were quickly adopted into Africa's agriculture, probably because of being so similar to the Bambara groundnut, a popular indigenous plant. Okay, so this sentence presents a set of facts about peanuts. It says that peanuts are native to South America. They were introduced to Africa by Portuguese explorers in the early 16th century, and peanuts were quickly adopted into Africa's agriculture, probably because they were very similar to Bambara groundnut, a popular native plant to Africa. Now let us evaluate the errors by splitting this sentence into smaller clauses. So here comes our first clause. Native to South America, when peanuts were introduced to Africa by Portuguese explorers early in the 16th century, here peanuts is the subject and were introduced is the verb. Now comes our second clause that reads, they were quickly adopted into Africa's agriculture, probably because of being so similar to the Bambara groundnut, a popular indigenous plant. Here, they is the subject and were adopted is the verb. Now, in clause 1, the opening modifier native to South America talks about peanuts. So what should follow this modifier is this noun peanuts. But we see that when comes after this modifier. So we need to get rid of this when to place this modifier close to this noun to effectively communicate the meaning of the sentence. So this sentence certainly has a modifier error. Now after going through the underlined portion of the sentence, we do not find any more mistakes. So let us move on to the POE and see what's the correct answer. Now as we just discussed, choice A is not the correct answer because it has the modifier error. In choice B, we see that there is no verb in the sentence that makes the entire construction a fragment. Now, having been introduced is not a verb by itself. Adopted here is not a verb, but it's an verb ed modifier, and of being is not a verb. Now, a few words about the ed modifier. Now, the verb ed modifiers are actually derived from the past tense verbs. Okay, let's take a few examples to understand this. Tom painted this picture. Now, this sentence has been written in simple past tense in active voice, and here painted denotes the action done by Tom. So painted is a verb here. Again, the very same thing when we write in passive voice, it reads this picture was painted by Tom. Here painted is now preceded by a helping verb to turn this active voice into passive voice, and again was painted here denotes an action done by Tom. So in both the subjects, Tom is the doer of the action, right? Now let's take a look at sentence 3. This picture painted by Tom is beautiful. So in this sentence, is our verb, and painted has now become the verb ed modifier because it is not denoting an action per se, but it is actually giving us some information about the noun this picture. Okay, so when we use the verb ed to denote an action done by a doer, then that's the past tense. To make it into passive voice, it must be preceded by a helping verb, and when we just have the verb ed modifier not denoting an action done by the doer but giving some information about an entity, then it becomes the verb ed modifier. Similarly, adopted in this choice B, is actually a verb modifier because if we say that peanuts adopted into Africa's agriculture, if we have to make it a verb, then it means that peanuts is the doer that adopted something, but that is not the intended meaning. Peanuts were adopted into African agriculture, right? So we need that were before adopted to change this into a passive voice past tense verb. So Adopted is a verb ed modifier, and that's why choice B is wrong, because we do not have any verb in this choice. Let's move on to choice C. In choice C, peanuts have two verbs, were introduced and were adopted, which are correct. It tells it gives out the meaning of the sentence, and they also has a verb were. So, and that of being a little wordy construction has been replaced by with because. So choice C is the correct answer for this sentence. Again, let's take a look at choice D. In choice D, we see that there is no verb in the first part of this choice, like introduced and adopted. Again, in lack of that helping verb before them, do not qualify as the verbs. They are the verb ed modifiers here, right? And if we added verb before introduced and adopted, again we would make peanuts the doer of the action, which is not the intended meaning of the sentence. So choice D is also not the correct answer. Choice E again repeats the same errors as choice D. Introduced, and introduced is not a verb, it's a verb ed modifier, and having been adopted is not a verb by itself. So choice E is also a fragment. So as discussed before, choice C is the correct answer for this sentence. Now let's quickly take a look at the takeaway messages. We must place the modifiers as close to the entity it modifies as possible for the effective meaning of the sentence. And all the all the subjects must have a verb, and we must be able to correctly identify the verb ed past tense verbs and the verb ed modifiers. Okay, the concepts tested in this sentence um, have been covered in e-GMAT concepts: subject, verb must exist, and modifiers, relative pronouns.